Hello, BookTube. Welcome to Revenant Reads. I'm Vin, and today I have a modest book haul for you. Okay, I got just a few things to show you. Some good stuff, I think, though. First, I'm going to start with a comic book. First thing, these are all things that I got in the mail from Hamilton Books, I believe. Pretty cheap. But this is Captain Kronos, Vampire Hunter from Hammer Comics. If you're not familiar with Captain Kronos, Vampire Hunter, that was a 1974 Hammer film from Hammer Film Productions over in the UK. It was one of their, I would say, tamer vampire outings of that era. It wasn't heavy on sexuality or nudity. But Captain Kronos is kind of this swashbuckling vampire killer. He walks around. He got hold of a katana, even though I think it's supposed to be during the Protestant Reformation. But he's walking around with a katana, and he has this assistant, this older kind of professor type, helping him out, kind of going through ancient rituals and how to detect vampires. And the world that they create in there is actually really fascinating. There's all different types of vampires, and they have to use different tests to figure out what kinds of vampires they are actually dealing with, so then they can actually go through and confront them. And Kronos, he's very much like a counterculture type of hero. He's smoking, he's shacking up with women. It's a fun movie. It's a really fun movie. I really enjoy it. It's definitely one of my favorite 70s Hammer films, and it's the perfect kind of film that would have made a great series. It reminds me a little bit of like what Buffy the Vampire Slayer ended up being. You could easily see a Monster of the Week type of format with that movie. Unfortunately, we never got any kind of sequels, but I had heard that there were comics eventually made from Hammer, and this collection here is the first 4 issues. And there's a foreword by Caroline Munro, very well known, who was in the first movie. You can see here's a photo of her from that time. And I haven't read it yet, but I love comics. I love horror. I'm really looking forward to this one. Some of the artwork is really getting me excited for it. Just bring up one of these here to show. Like, if you look at this 2-page spread, just on the artwork and the action, there he is surrounded by these feral-looking vampires. I expect to have some good fun with this. I'll probably read this tomorrow. Staying on the vampire theme, it's actually, I didn't realize this is going to be a theme, but it is. I picked up The Poet and the Vampire. The Curse of Byron and the Birth of Literature's Greatest Monsters. This, of course, is about the haunted summer with Mary Shelley. She would become Mary Shelley. She was still Mary Wollstonecraft at that time. But you got Percy Shelley, Lord Byron, John Polidori, the Doctor. This is the birth of the Frankenstein monster, but it also is, in certain ways, the birth of Dracula, or at least the progenitors of him. So this says, in the spring of 1816, Lord Byron was the greatest poet of his generation and the most famous man in Britain, but his personal life was about to erupt. Fleeing his celebrity, notoriety, and debts, he sought refuge in Europe. Taking his young doctor with him, as an inexperienced medic with literary aspirations of his own, Dr. John Polidori could not believe his luck. That summer, another literary star arrived in Geneva. With Percy B. Shelley came his lover, Mary, and her stepsister, Claremont. For the next 3 months, this party of young bohemians shared their lives charged with sexual and artistic tensions. It was a period of extraordinary creativity. Mary Shelley started writing Frankenstein, the Gothic masterpiece of romantic fiction. Byron completed Childe Harold's Pilgrimage, his epic poem, and Polidori would begin The Vampire, the first great vampire novel. Although I believe that was a story begun by Byron and finished by John Polidori. It was also a time of remarkable drama and emotional turmoil. For Byron and the Shelleys, their stay by the lake would serve to immortalize them in the annals of literary history. But for Claire and Polidori, this Swiss sojourn would scar them forever. So, it's a history book. I would say it's got a decent amount of notes at the end. Text, but also with some nice images in the middle, some plates. So, fascinating time period. I have done a decent amount of reading about the history of the Frankenstein narratives and about Mary Shelley, and and also about Polidori and Byron in this time period. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what this one does. And sticking with the vampire theme, I also picked up Todd Browning's Dracula by Gary D. Rhodes. This is from Tomahawk Press, but Gary D. Rhodes is a terrific horror film historian. He's done many works. The one that I had read maybe almost 2 years ago now that blew me away was The Birth of the American Horror Film, where he looks at silent horror from really its conception around 1896 up to 1915. And that study is just a treasure trove of primary sources, and I loved reading it. And this is a book that he did that's completely dedicated to 1931's Dracula, a movie that I don't consider, and I'm sure most people wouldn't consider it, the strongest of the Universal horror films of the 1930s. It's very stilted in some ways, very stagey. Certainly doesn't have the dynamic, the visuals and the care of story that we would see somebody like James Whale bring to the Frankenstein Frankenstein movies, or The Invisible Man or anything like that. But it's still an incredibly important movie. I mean, this kind of helps to begin the horror genre as we know it. Horror films existed before this, but we didn't call them that. They didn't refer to them by that name, but it was really this and Frankenstein, which came out later on in the same year, that people started using the term horror films. And this really is the film that brought supernatural horror to American cinema. That was something that American horror films stayed away from for a very long time, all through the 20s. Their horror was natural, and it was about body disfigurement. They were almost allergic to the supernatural in their films, especially because it was so European. So I guess it's fitting that the first one that really does it in the U.S. is about an evil European. That probably would have been very fitting for Americans at the time. And this looks like it'll be another very good study. It says, few movies in film history have resonated with audience as deeply and for as many years as Universal's original 1931 version of Dracula, starring Bela Lugosi as a vampire count. Filmmaker and film historian Gary D. Rhodes brings years of research to fruition, providing conclusive answers to such questions as, when did Todd Browning first approach Universal about producing a film version of Bram Stoker's Dracula? And who did the studio first want to cast as the female lead? And what were the studio's initial plans for a sequel? Overflowing with newly unearthed information and fresh analysis, and fully illustrated, Todd Browning's Dracula is one of the most in-depth looks ever published on a single film. And, yeah, I mean, just perusing through this, you can see, in addition to the incredible notes that are in here. I mean, it's at the end of the chapters, you just got pages and pages of sources, which somebody like me, that's a gold mine. But we have production notes and letters from the time period, production stills. He looks like he goes into some of the influence of silent film, like Nosferatu. This is gonna be a great one to dive into. It's, what more can I say? All right, we're over vampires right now, but we're not over film history and kind of a monster film history. But this is a very different take, and this is a Kim Jong Il production. The extraordinary true story of a kidnapped filmmaker, his star actress, and a young dictator's rise to power. This is one that I've been wanting to get a hold of for a while. Kim Jong Il in the 1980s decided that North Korea needed its own kaiju film, giant monster film. And instead of culling and nurturing North Korean talent, he kidnapped a South Korean actress and a South Korean filmmaker and pretty much said, make my movie. and they were forced to. And it's a really amazing story, and kind of a bizarre film that they end up making. But yeah, not a great film, but really interesting ideas actually that end up coming out of it. But read the back of this. It's before becoming the world's most notorious dictator, Kim Jong Il ran North Korea's Ministry for Propaganda and all its film studios. Underwhelmed by the pool of talent available to him, he took drastic steps, ordering the kidnapping of Cho Eun-hee, South Korea's most famous actress, and her ex-husband Shin Sang-ok, the country's most famous filmmaker. That as Madame Choi and Shin Sang-ok begin to make North Korea's greatest films, they hatch a plan to escape they hatch a plan of escape worthy of a blockbuster Hollywood ending. A Kim Jong Il production is that rarest of books, a wildly entertaining, cunningly told story that offers a rare glimpse into a nation still wrapped in mystery. Sorry, I kind of flubbed the reading on that one. But it gives you an idea. This is one heck of a story. You know, if you want odd, crazy film history, I think this is definitely one to check out. And I'm looking forward to it. And the last one, nothing to do with film, kind of goes into my fascination with historical edge weapons. This is a beautiful looking hardcover. It's Warfare and Weaponry in Dynastic Egypt by Rebecca Dean. I think the cover design on this is great. I mean, the whole book here looks fantastic. And it is a survey and explanation of Egyptian weapons. Here you see some of the Bronze Age swords. It goes into how they were used, how warfare occurred in Egypt, different archaeological evidence, of course. And there is also a whole section on practical archaeology, or experimental archaeology, as they call it, where they're using these weapons mostly on like pig carcasses, just to see what kind of damage would be done, and they're going through the effects of these things. So I mean, turn away if you don't like anything gruesome, but here's some of the stuff they were doing on the pig carcasses, which if you've seen Forged in Fire on History Channel, you see that sort of stuff all the time. But this looks like it'll be a very fun read, not a very long read, but yeah, I am looking forward to this one as well. So that's what I got in the mail. That's my book haul. If you've read any of these and can give me your thoughts, that'd be great. Otherwise, until I see you next time.